I'd barely pulled my truck onto the gravel drive of my ranch when I saw her arms crossed, sunglasses on, standing dead center like she was guarding the place. Karen, every neighborhood has one. But this one had no idea who she was dealing with. I'd been gone for a few months, traveling and handling business. And I guess my absence had given her just enough confidence to start thinking she ran things around here. Before I could even unload my bags, she stormed over, pointing at my gate like it was a crime scene. "You can't just waltz in here without HOA approval," she said, like she was the sheriff of my own land. I almost laughed, but the sight of her pulling out her phone stopped me cold. She dialed fast, speaking into it like she'd just caught an intruder. It didn't take long for me to hear the words she was calling the cops. I stood there, calm, almost curious to see how far she was going to push this. She clearly didn't recognize me, or she'd know I wasn't just some random ranch owner. What she didn't know, what made this whole situation almost funny, was that I oversee every HOA in the country. Every board, every committee, every little rule she thinks she's enforcing. It all runs through me. A few minutes later, a patrol car rolled up, lights flashing, dust kicking up from the driveway. Karen waved them down like she'd just saved the community from a disaster. The officer stepped out, scanning between her and me, trying to piece together what was going on. Karen started talking fast, her voice sharp and certain, completely unaware that the man she was trying to report could change her entire HOA world with a single phone call, and I was about to let her find out. The officers approached slowly, their eyes narrowing as they took in the scene. Karen wasted no time painting her version of events, how I'd suspiciously appeared on the property, how I'd refused to follow HOA rules, and how the neighborhood had been concerned for weeks. She spoke with the confidence of someone who thought her word was law, nodding toward my truck and ranch house like they were evidence in her case. I stayed quiet for the moment, letting her dig herself deeper. Part of me wanted to see just how far she'd take the story. The truth was, I'd owned this ranch for years, long before Karen even moved into the area. But I'd been away overseeing HOA operations in different states, traveling between board meetings, reviewing policies, and mediating disputes far bigger than whatever this was. This ranch was my place to breathe, not a battlefield, at least. Not until Karen decided to turn it into one. The irony was almost too good. She thought she was dealing with another homeowner she could intimidate with citations and empty threats. She had no clue I could rewrite the very HOA rules she was quoting, or even dissolve her local board entirely if I wanted to. But that wasn't my style. I'd rather watch the truth land naturally the moment her realization hit. One of the officers turned to me, asking for ID. I handed it over without a word, knowing exactly what was about to happen when they ran my name. Karen crossed her arms tighter, a satisfied smirk creeping onto her face, like she'd already won. What she didn't notice was the faint flicker of surprise in the officer's eyes when he glanced at the screen in his patrol car. He looked back at me, then at Karen. And I knew we'd just reached the tipping point. The officer stepped away for a moment, murmuring into his radio while glancing at me from time to time. Karen kept talking, her voice getting sharper, adding new details about how I'd been gone for months and how concerned the HOA was about the state of my property. She pointed toward my barn, claiming it was violating structure guidelines and that my horses looked suspiciously unregistered. Whatever that meant. Meanwhile, I could see movement from the porch of the ranch house next door. Old man Harris, my longtime neighbor, was leaning on his railing, watching with that slow, knowing look. He'd seen more HOA disputes than anyone around here, and if there was a man who knew when something was about to go sideways, it was him. The second officer returned from his patrol car, but instead of speaking to Karen first, he pulled me aside. "Sir, are you aware of your standing with the HOA associations?" His tone carried a strange mix of respect and caution. I gave him a small nod, saying nothing more. I wasn't here to flex power. I was here to see if integrity still existed in situations like this. Karen, still oblivious, began insisting that I be issued a citation on the spot for noncompliance. Her words were dripping with authority she didn't actually have. That's when Harris finally called out from his porch, "Karen, you might want to rethink this one." His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it that made her glance back at him with a scowl. The officers exchanged looks, clearly trying to piece together who exactly they were dealing with. I could feel the tension tightening around us. Karen thought she was about to win, but she had no idea that every rule she was quoting was about to be turned upside down. Karen's voice grew louder, almost like she could sense the controls slipping from her grasp. She jabbed her finger toward my ranch house, listing off violations she clearly pulled out of thin air paint color, not HOA approved. Fencing non-compliant, and even accusing me of running unauthorized livestock operations. Each claim was more ridiculous than the last, but she spoke as if the officers had no choice but to act. The lead officer listened, but his eyes kept flicking to me, like he was weighing something he couldn't quite say yet. I stood still, arms crossed, letting her words echo across the driveway. In truth, I'd faced board meetings with hundreds of people shouting at once. Yet somehow, this one woman and her theatrics felt more exhausting than. Another vehicle rolled up, a black SUV with tinted windows. It wasn't a police car, but I recognized it immediately. One of my regional HOA directors stepped out, his suit sharp against the dusty backdrop of the ranch. He carried a leather folder under his arm and moved with the calm confidence of someone used to making decisions that couldn't be undone. Karen froze for a moment, her expression flickering between confusion and annoyance. "And who exactly are you?" she demanded. The director didn't answer her. He walked straight to the lead officer, handing over documents with my name on them. The officer's posture shifted almost instantly, his face tightening with realization. The air felt charged now, like the pause before a thunderstorm breaks. Karen kept glancing between the three of us, her earlier smugness giving way to something that looked dangerously close to panic. She didn't yet know what was in those papers, but she could sense that the ground under her feet was about to give way, and I was ready to watch it happen. The lead officer flipped through the papers, his brows furrowing deeper with each page. Karen tried to lean in to see, but the regional director stepped slightly to block her view. Her frustration was building, and I could see it in the tightness of her jaw. She finally blurted out, "Whatever that is, it doesn't change the fact that he's breaking HOA rules." Her voice cracked just enough to betray the nervousness creeping in. That's when the director turned to me with a tone that was calm, but edged with urgency. "We need to discuss this inside now." It caught me off guard. This wasn't the place or the tone for a casual update. Something was wrong. I glanced at the officers, who were now clearly torn between mediating a neighborhood complaint and following whatever protocol the director's presence demanded. As we stepped toward the ranch house, Karen called out, "You can't just leave this. I'll take it to the board myself." The director stopped mid-step, looked over his shoulder, and said evenly, "You might want to be careful with that, Karen. The board you're talking about doesn't exist anymore." The words landed like a thunderclap. Even I hadn't been told of any structural changes. My mind started piecing it together. Why a director would show up unannounced, why he'd bring documents with my name prominently displayed. This wasn't just about Karen overstepping. Something much bigger was in motion, and my own position might be at the center of it. Karen's outrage shifted to confusion, but she stayed close enough to eavesdrop as we reached my front door. The director lowered his voice, "Just for me. You're not the only one she's been targeting. And if what we found is true, she's not working alone." The ground beneath this dispute had just shifted again, inside the ranch house. The director laid the thick folder on my kitchen table and slid it toward me. The top document was a detailed report, stamped with the HOA National Oversight Seal. My name appeared again and again next to every single HOA in the country. I frowned, realizing what it meant. I didn't just have influence here. Kay technically had authority over every HOA board nationwide. Karen had been fighting a battle she could never win, before I could process it fully. The director pulled out another file. This one marked confidential misconduct. Inside were records of Karen's complaints, not just here, but in multiple states, false reports, harassment, even attempts to bribe local officials. And there, in bold type, the most damning piece, an email chain linking her to a small group of HOA board members, working together to push residents out and flip properties for profit.